Welcome back to the Pro side of Live2D Beginner vs Pro. In this episode, I'll be teaching you ways to further improve our head angles, where I'll be introducing you to Augmented Physics and how to add depth to areas of our head for more realistic angles. We'll be working off the basic angles we created in the beginner episode. So, if you aren't confident in creating the base XYZ angles yet, I recommend reviewing the previous episode. Let's start off with our eyes. Right now, they can turn, but they seem a little flat still. We can better represent the ball shape of the eye by making further adjustments to our irises and eyelids. We need to separate our eyes a little more than we have currently. First, we need to create a new warp deformer for our pupil and iris, called iris right XY, and iris left XY, for the other side. We also want warp deformers for the highlights, called highlight right XY and highlight left XY. Move these warp deformers out of the eye's XY deformer by clicking and dragging. And make sure that our parameters are at the default values to avoid any unwanted warping. We also want to create new warp deformers on top of our eyelid right XY and eyelid left XY. We'll call these eyelid right angle X and eyelid left angle X. Now our irises won't move with the rest of the eyes anymore. So, let's rig these for our head angles using these new deformers. We're rigging these separately so we can better control the shape of the inner eye. Let's start with angle X. Set this to -30. We're going to move both our irises to the left till our left iris sits in the middle of the eyeball. Our right iris will end up too far to the left due to the change in perspective. So, we need to move it back towards the center of the head. The iris will look a little large on our eye, so we need to squish it horizontally using the warp deformer like this. Make sure to test it out with our eyeball XY movements too, to make sure it still looks great. For the highlights, we repeat the same process. Move to the left, but this time we want the highlight to sit slightly further to the direction of the turn, to better represent the roundness of the eyeball. Once we're happy with this side, we rig it the same for the other turn. Now for angle Y. Similar to our angle X, we're going to move both irises till they sit at the center of the eyeball. We'll then need to adjust both irises closer to the center of the head for both up and down. Basically, move the irises down slightly at Y30 and up slightly at Y-30. I also like to move the center bezier with this movement too. Just down a little at 30 and up a little at -30. Our highlights are exactly the same. Just make sure that they are slightly offset from the pupil like before to get that eyeball depth. Finally, we need to rig our corner angles. We can use the perspective tool method we used in the beginner episode. Don't forget to synthesize the corners first. For our irises and highlights, we need to manually set up each corner, as we can't use motion mirroring here. Make sure to test your angles regularly as you rig the corners with the perspective tool, to make sure everything is moving nicely and in the right spot. One last thing to adjust with our eye angles. We're going to use the eyelid angle X deformers that we created earlier to shape the eye just a little more. We only need keyforms on angle X for these. Now, for our left head turn first, all we need to do is move the top middle bezier of our warp deformer towards the direction of the head turn. In this case, to the left. And repeat the same for the right too. Very simple, but this makes our lashes look like they protrude a little more as the head turns. Moving on from the eyes, now let's add some depth to our mouth. We're only going to be adjusting the inner mouth. The lips are fine as they are, but you might notice our tongue and lower teeth are looking very flat for our head turns. Let's use an easy method to get some more mouth depth. We need to make a new warp deformer for our tongue and lower teeth. We'll call this lower jaw XY. Now, before we change anything, we want to create 3 parameters on angle X, angle Y, and mouth open. Once we've done that, we can start our angles. We want to keep our mouth open at 1 during this process. It's also a little easier to see with mouth smile at 1 too, but that's optional. We need to deform the mouth towards the center of the head. The easiest way to do this is to set the edit level to 3 up here, then dragging the corners of the warp deformer into this diagonal shape. We can also use motion mirroring to set up the other side. For angle Y, we need to move the deformer down at Y30 and up at Y-30. We also need to squish down the deformer at Y30 and extend up the deformer at Y-30. As we still have this deformer within our mouth XY deformer, all we need to do for the corners is to synthesize them, and it should follow the head properly. Double check the mouth open at all angles before we move on, as we may need to make small adjustments at the corners. For the hair, we're actually going to rig this differently to the beginner episode. That's why it's currently not following the head. The setup is relatively similar, however. First, we'll group our hair parts into warp deformers. We want to group all of our front bang pieces into hair front XY. Our side hair pieces should be separated left and right into side hair XY deformers. And for our back hair, we want to create an XY deformer for each strand. We're going to rig our front and side hair together first. Make sure to set keyforms for all 3 of our new warp deformers on angle X and angle Y. Now, let's move our hair towards the turn angle first. So, left for angle X minus 30 here. We don't need to move this much, as we'll use the warp to shape the hair to the head. Much like with our head rigging, we're going to use the middle beziers to deform the hair to fit the head better like this. Generally, the top beziers of the deformer won't deform much, as they should appear closer to the center of the head. This should be exactly the same for our side bang left here. Just follow the head and the front hair. Our side bang right is a little different, as it will be affected more by the perspective change. Similar to our other hair, we're going to deform the center beziers towards the turn angle. But this time, we're going to squish in the sides some more, so it appears to get thinner. Once we're happy with our hair for this side, we need to repeat this exact process for the right turn. Before we start angle Y, there's a little trick I'd like to show you. We're going to copy and paste a copy of both of our side hair pieces, as well as all of their deformers, by selecting all of them, and using Ctrl-C, then Ctrl-V. Next, we want to change the draw order for the duplicated art mesh to a number that's behind our face layers. Let's use 98. Another thing I like to do here is adjust the multiply color. Just darken this piece a little using the slider. As a note, since we have the art mesh rigged on a blend shape, we need to make sure the draw order and color change is set for these keyforms as well. We should also rename the duplicated deformers to side hair back left and right XY to differentiate them from the originals. Now, for the magic, starting with our left turn, select our new duplicate deformer for side hair back right, and we're going to deform the middle bezier back towards the center of the head. This will make our new piece appear behind the original, see? We want to adjust this to look as if it's the back side of the original strand, so now, our hair will look much more three-dimensional. I also recommend squishing down the top of this deformer, so it doesn't appear up here at all. Repeat this with the other side. Moving on to angle Y, very similar to angle X, we want to use the middle beziers to fit the hair to our head angles. Much like our head perspective at Y30, we also need to adjust down the top of the deformer to shrink the top part of the head like this. For Y-30, we also need to shift down the hair a little, as well as creating the deformations with the beziers. Before we move on to our corner angles, we should rig our back hair first. We can use the perspective method on all of our hair after. Our back hair setup is exactly the same as the beginner episode, but we're going to add one extra strand using the duplication method we used for the side hair. Let's duplicate our back hair 2 pieces. These will be in front of our current back hair 2 pieces, so they will end up a little closer to our head for the X turns. Shift each back hair left deformer to the left at X minus 30 like this, making sure they are all visible. Repeat on the other side at X 30. Angle Y is still very simple for our back hair. We move the hair down a little at Y 30 and up at Y minus 30. Basically the opposite of the head turn direction. Now all of our cardinal angles are set up, we can synthesize all of our hair deformer corners. And of course, we once again use the perspective tool to adjust the hair at each corner to fit the head like this. Double check all of our angles, and that should be our hair all done. Our head angles are all done. But I have one more trick up my sleeve to show you. Let me introduce you to Augmented Physics. Basically, we're going to use a physics group to handle the head turns, rather than just the tracking parameter. This way, we can make things a little more dynamic. It's actually very easy to set up. First, we need to make new parameters for each head angle. We'll call these Angle X Aug, Angle Y Aug, and Angle Z Aug. Make sure all of these are the same range, so minimum minus 30, default 0, and maximum 30. Now, we're going to select everything on angle X using the select button on this menu here. Then, on that same menu, click change, select our new angle X Aug parameter, and click OK to confirm. That should move all of our rigging to the new parameter. We need to repeat this exact process with our angle Y and Z parameters. Now, open up the physics menu. You'll notice that our model will no longer follow our cursor, as we've moved our head angle rigging to the new parameters. Now we need to link them together. Let's create a new physics group called Angle X. Don't worry about clicking a preset, as we'll set up the input and output ourselves. First, add Angle X as our input. Make sure the type is set to angle and effectiveness at 100. We also want to change the input normalization to angle minus 50, 0, 50. Next, create one pendulum. You can play around with the pendulum settings, but here's my recommendation. Duration 10, shaking influence 0.8, reaction time 0.4, and convergence speed 1.5. Now to the output settings. We need to add our new Angle X Aug parameter here. It won't move around much at first. Let's increase the output. And Angle X should be working. We can duplicate this Angle X group for both Angle Y and Z, making sure to rename both appropriately, and changing the input and output to the desired angles. Now, all of our head angles should be working properly, and also have a little bit of bounce to them. One last thing I like to do to add a little extra to our head angles. Go to our Angle Z group, and all we're going to do is add Angle X as an input. This time, we'll set it to position rather than angle. We'll start off at 100 effectiveness and try it out. You'll notice now that Angle Z slightly adds to the Angle X head turns, making it look more interesting and dynamic. Since we set Angle X as a position input rather than an angle input, it won't stick like our other input, allowing us to use it much like our hair physics parameters for more swing. And with that, we're completely done with our head. Let's quickly go over what we learnt in this episode. We learnt about creating eye depth using warp deformers for the irises and lashes. We also used that method to create depth for our inner mouth. We used duplicated parts and deformers to create depth for our hair. And finally, I introduced you to Augmented Physics and how it can make our track parameters far more dynamic. The next Pro episode will cover our body and clothing physics. We'll be using more of our Augmented Physics, so give it some practice. Thank you to my Ko-Fi members for supporting the channel, especially our Ultra Shiny Treasure Pulse and Super Shiny Treasure Toxan. If you'd like to support the channel, please check out my Ko-Fi link in the description below. Take care and have fun in Live2D.